Hello students, we have been looking into the Indian society, the concepts and beliefs that have shaped and formed the Indian society over the ages. But there have been vast changes in Indian society also over the ages. Change and continuity is not special only to the Indian society but is common to all societies. Many famous sociologists have come up with different theories to study social change and social continuity. Before we look into these aspects, we will first look into our reasons for studying factors in continuity and change. Studying the past makes it possible for us to understand the human story across time. The experiences of societies, peoples, and nations over different ages reveal patterns of continuity and change. An analysis of these historical factors enables us to identify continuities over time in core institutions, values, ideals, and traditions that lead to change within societies and institutions. We can use this understanding to create new innovation and the development of new ideas, values, and ways of life. Students, why do you think that studying social continuity and change is very important? It is because the knowledge and understanding of the past enables us to analyze the causes and consequences of events and developments. Study of the past makes us aware of ways in which human beings have viewed themselves and their societies and the wider world at different periods of time. As students of sociology, you will find that knowing to read, reconstruct, and interpret the past allows us to answer questions such as how can we evaluate the usefulness and reliability of different historical sources? What are the roots of our social, political, and economic systems? What are our personal roots, and how can they be viewed as part of the human history? Why is the past important to us today? How has the world changed? How might it change in the future? How do perspectives about the past differ, and to what extent do these differences inform contemporary ideas and actions? What is social change and continuity? Continuity and change is a field of historical sociology concerned with long-term continuities and discontinuities in the structures of past societies. The emphasis here is upon studies whose agenda or methodology combines elements from traditional fields such as history, sociology, law, demography, economics, or anthropology, or ranges freely between them. Studies of continuity and change use comparative studies over a broad range of cultures and time spans. You may have already come across the term social change used within sociology that applies to modifications in social relationships or culture. In real life, we see that society and culture are interdependent, and therefore we can say that sociocultural change is a more accepted term. The study of sociocultural change is therefore the systematic study of variation in social and cultural systems. There are many methodological problems of identification and measurement of change, and one problem that is faced by all sociologists is that it is very rare for one cause to produce one effect. All societies are involved in a process of social change. However, in practical life, we see that this change may be so slow that the members of the society are hardly aware of it. People living in very traditional societies usually experience this. Societies are characterized by change, the rate of change, the processes of change, the directions of change. Social change refers to a change in the social order of a society. Social change may include changes in nature, social institutions, social behaviors, or social relations. For example, an Indian who lived in the rigid caste-based society of the 15th century will not be able to recognize the India of today, where discrimination based on caste is illegal and punishable by law. Students, what do you think is the basis of social change? The base of social change is change in the thought process in humans. Prominent theories of social change. Social change comes from two sources. One source is random or unique factors such as climate, weather, or the presence of specific groups of people. Another source is systematic factors. For example, successful development has the same general requirements: a stable and flexible government, enough free and available resources, and a diverse social organization of society. So, social change is usually a combination of systematic factors along with some random or unique factors. Generally, a theory of change should include changes in social structure like population shifts, processes and mechanisms of social change, and directions of change. Hegelian. The classic Hegelian dialectic model of change is based on the interaction of opposing forces. Starting from a point of momentary status, thesis countered by antithesis first yields conflict, then it subsequently results in a new synthesis. Marxist. Marxism presents a dialectical and materialistic concept of history. Humankind's history is a fundamental struggle between social classes. Kuhnian. The philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn argues in the structure of scientific revolutions with respect to Copernican revolution that people are unlikely to resist an unworkable change in their way of life despite many indications that the way of life paradigm is not functioning properly until a better way of life can be presented. Heraclitan. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus used the metaphor of a river to speak of change thus: on those stepping into rivers, swaying the same other and other waters flow. What Heraclitus seems to be suggesting here is that in order for the river to remain the river, change must constantly be taking place. Thus, one may think of the Heraclitan model as parallel to that of a living organism, which, in order to remain alive, must constantly be changing. Taoist. The Chinese philosophical work Dao De Jing 1.8 and 2.78 uses the metaphor of water as the ideal agent of change. Water, although soft and yielding, will eventually wear away stone. Change in this model is to be natural, harmonious, and steady, albeit imperceptible. Resource-based economy. Jacques Fresco's concept of a resource-based economy that replaces the need for the current monetary economy, which is scarcity-oriented or scarcity-based. Fresco argues that the world is rich in natural resources and energy, and with modern technology and efficiency, the needs of the global population can be met. Causes of social change. We now know that social change is always happening within all societies, and understanding how and why they're happening can help us to predict the changes of the future and influence the future of societies in a positive way. The actions of individuals, organizations, and social movements have an impact on society and become the catalyst for social change. The actions of individuals, however, occur within the context of culture, institutions, and power structures inherited from the past. For a single individual to cause dramatic social change, the society itself should be ready for the change. For example, Mahatma Gandhi in India, Martin Luther King in the US, and Lenin in the USSR can be said to be individuals who caused enormous social change in their country. But when we look at the events that resulted in the change, we see that the conditions for the social change existed in India, the US, and Russia. And that is the reason why these famous individuals were able to cause the social change. Broad social trends, for example, shifts in population, urbanization, industrialization, and bureaucratization can lead to significant social change. In the past, this has been mainly associated with modernization, the process whereby a society moves from traditional less developed modes of production like small-scale agriculture, to technologically advanced industrial modes of production. Trends like population growth and urbanization have a significant impact on other aspects of society like social structure, institutions, and culture. Substantial change comes from outside acculturation. Acculturation is a learning process where knowledge is transferred from one culture to another by direct or secondary contact. Enculturation is a learning of how to use the accepted patterns of cultural behavior that your culture prescribes and gives you full members of your society. The acculturation is usually due to first-hand contact with another group, usually a more powerful one. The significant changes that have usually occurred in countries have been due to 1. Colonialism, 2. Globalism in post-colonial world, 3. Change in country of study is most likely associated with modernization, leading to discarding of tradition, and globalization, the breaking down of barriers between nations, societies, and cultures. It is important to consider the concept of localization, which is a particular way that groups of people have responded to globalization. Various theories offer explanations of these responses in terms of accommodation and resistance, that is, to what extent have people accepted change and to what extent they have resisted it. Often holding on to tradition has resulted in revitalization, a reaffirmation, even a rebirth of traditional practices. Factors for social continuity. We will now try to understand social continuity in this section. Social continuity cannot simply be defined as the absence of social change, that is, things remaining the same, because social change is a continual process in all societies. Nothing remains the same. However, within societies, there are structures which are inherently resistant to change, and in this sense, we can talk about them as being social continuities. Individuals within societies need social continuities to a lesser or greater extent, depending on significant factors like age, gender, education, access to power, wealth, vested interest, and so on. Even rock-solid institutions like the family, the law, and religions are subject to change, even though they represent social continuity. There has always been family. It is still the foundational institution for society and the primary agent of socialization. However, the composition of family has changed in recent years, leading to different kinds of families and different socialization experiences from their members. India is a very good example of this, as we have seen the breakdown of the traditional joint family system, which is slowly disappearing from the local Indian social scene. The same ideas can be applied to law and religion. Social and cultural continuities can be compared to individual habits, comfortable patterns of behavior that give individuals a sense of security and a personal control, a safe place in a sea of social and cultural change. There is a high correlation between the rate of social and cultural change and resistance to that change. In times when members of a society feel that change is out of control, it is likely that the desire for continuity becomes more extreme, resulting in backward-looking idealizations of the past. In India, we are seeing nostalgia for the good old times of joint families because the current nuclear families offer a lot of freedom and monetary independence. But many people feel that the younger generation is growing up without values, and there is a lack of relationships that was present in earlier joint families. While social change is itself a continuity, certain periods of human history have created great transformations. The Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution created one such great transformation. Polanyi saw it as beginning in the 17th and the 18th centuries and continuing today. The two great transformations saw the rise of capitalist, global economy and growth in production and wealth, a scientific revolution, new ways of thinking about causation, moving from religious to secular, A new concept of time, population growth, immigration, and urbanization, a political move to nation. Understanding the development of the theories of social continuity and change can help us understand and evaluate the more recent ideas that they gave birth to. Evolutionism, functionalism, historical particularism, and Marxian conflict theory are sets of ideas that were developed to explain the nature of societies in the 19th and the early 20th centuries. Marxist conflict theory is believed to be the only one to have any relevance to change in the world today. Theories associated with social change and continuity. Early evolutionary theory. This theory of social change was based on the assumption that all societies develop from simple, small-scale beginnings into more complex industrial and post-industrial societies. It is also assumed that the changes inherent in this development were all progress. Early evolutionary theory described change rather than explained it and ignored many patterns of development which were occurring. Modern evolutionary theory. This more updated version sees socio-cultural evolution as a tendency for social structures to become more complex over time. It also believes that this process is multilinear and that change occurs in many different ways and at different rates. Modern evolutionary theory believes that change is not always necessarily progress and that it will not inevitably produce greater happiness for all the people concerned. Functionalist theory or structural functionalism. Functionalist theory assumes that as societies develop, they become increasingly more complex and interdependent. Functionalist theory emphasizes social order rather than social change. Key concepts of this theory are those of differentiation and integration. Differentiation occurs as society becomes more complex, but the new institutions must be integrated with each other into the whole. In other words, change occurs, but structures within society change or emerges to compensate. The new structures are integrated to ensure the smooth functioning of society. Conflict theory, Marxism, Marx and Engels. Marxism says that radical change was inevitable in society. Marxism argued that the potential for change was built into the basic structures of society. According to Marx, eventually society reaches a point where its own organization creates a barrier to further economic growth, and at that point, crisis precipitates a revolutionary transformation of the society. For example, from feudalism to capitalism, or from capitalism to socialism. Marxists believed that social order was maintained through socialization, education, and ideology. Thus, control is maintained to suit the vested interests of powerful groups. As the interests of these groups change, so does society. Change is therefore ongoing until crisis point is reached and transformation occurs. While conflict theory is useful in explaining significant events in history and ongoing changing patterns of race and gender relations, it struggles to adequately explain the dramatic impact of technological development on society or the changes to family organization. Symbolic interactionism developed as an alternative to functionalism, emphasizing that social interaction is symbolic in nature and that social reality is constructed by the people participating in it rather than by external laws. Reference Herbert Blumer and Peter Berger. Symbolic interactionists argue that people give meaning to events and objects and that those people agree about these meanings. It becomes irrelevant what is really happening because the participants are engaged in interpretive processes, and it is these interpretations that shape their perceptions of the world. Postmodernist social theory or post-structuralism. Postmodernism argues that both social reality and knowledge is socially constructed. Postmodernism rejects general explanations of change which rely on the idea of a single total social system or assumptions about class or gender power. Postmodernists see power as dispersed and localized, rather than directed from top down. For postmodernists, there are many knowledges and ways of knowing, multiple sets of moral rules and ethics, which people in society tap into their local level. Other recent social theory, especially the discussion coming out of America, focus on forms of collective behavior as a force for change. Here, social movement is defined as a large number of people who come together as part of an organized effort to bring about or resist social change. For example, resource mobilization theory argues that a social movement cannot be sustained simply by discontent with existing structures. Students, one important factor that you all have to note after studying the earlier social theories and trying to understand the new ones that are now being created is the movement away from grand theory towards the partial, fragmented theory. Sociologists have found that it is problematic to try and construct theories which attempt to explain everything, the relationship between social change and all aspects of society. The grand theories of the past arose out of ideologies of their periods in which they were created, but they could not totally explain social change and continuity. Sociologists have realized today that social theories are not instruments or tools by which people can examine societies and cultures. They themselves become culture and influence people. For example, Marx theory has influenced social change and still influences social changes in many countries in the world. Nevertheless, social theory is important because it attempts to address the human condition in change. Social theory offers a way of operating in the world, helping us clarify norms and values, political and economic understanding, and the relationships of these things. Conclusion. In conclusion, let us take a look at some of the recent changes and continuities in the world today. One of the most obvious changes currently occurring is a change in population distribution. In the recent decades, developing countries became a larger proportion of world population, increasing from 68% in 1950 to 82% in 2010, while population of the developed countries has declined from 32% of total world population in 1950 to 18% in 2010. However, population growth throughout the world is slowing. The other major factor of social change in the world today is technology, which has created a global village where communication between different parts of the globe are very quick. If we look at the factors of continuity, we see that the family is a unit of social structure and has remained the same throughout all these changes. Culture in various places has gone through some change due to globalization, but the localization movement is also becoming quite strong in all parts of the world. So students, both social change and continuity are constant factors in every society, and a sociologist who hopes to make a meaningful contribution to society with his work should be able to understand and predict both these factors to be successful in the profession of sociology.